The world outside is growing quiet, and a story is waiting for you in the stillness. Welcome to Midnight Murmurs Studio, your safe harbor from the noise of the day. Find a comfortable place, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Before our story begins, a gentle reminder for your peaceful rest. For the deepest sleep, it's best to keep your phone at a safe distance from your head. So please take a moment to place your phone on a nearby table or chair. And while it's in your hand for this last moment, a quick tap on like and subscribe becomes a quiet signal to us, a soft murmur in the dark that lets us know these stories are a comfort to you. It's what keeps our studio going. Thank you for that. Now, settle in and hidden deep within the folds of the Jade Mountains, there lay a valley that the maps had forgotten. It was a place dominated not by stone or timber, but by the tall, swaying elegance of bamboo. The grove was ancient and vast, a sea of emerald green stalks that rose straight towards the sky, filtering the sunlight into soft, dappled patterns on the forest floor. When the wind blew through the valley, the bamboo stalks would knock gently against one another, creating a hollow, wooden percussion that sounded like nature's own wind chimes. It was a rhythmic, hypnotic sound that permeated the air, a constant reminder of the flexibility and resilience of the natural world. In the center of this grove, built on stilts over a slow-moving river, stood the workshop of Master Kenji. The structure was open to the elements, with walls made of sliding paper screens and a roof of cedar shingles that had turned silver with age. The air inside the workshop was always cool and moist, smelling of river water, wet wood, and the distinct, slightly sweet aroma of boiling mulberry bark. Master Kenji was a man of the water. He was slight of build, but his arms were roped with lean muscle, the result of decades of lifting heavy screens of wet pulp. He wore simple indigo work clothes, faded at the knees and elbows, and his feet were usually bare, gripping the wet wooden floorboards with familiarity. He was a washi maker, a master of traditional paper. In a world that was rapidly digitizing, where thoughts were typed on glass screens and deleted in a microsecond, Kenji dedicated his life to creating something tangible. He made paper that was designed to last for 1,000 years, paper that had a soul, paper that waited patiently for a brush or a pen to give it meaning. The path to the bamboo grove was overgrown, a deliberate barrier to discourage the casual tourist. But on a humid, overcast afternoon, a young man stumbled out of the tree line. His name was Leo. He was a social media moderator for a massive technology firm. For 12 hours a day, his eyes were glued to multiple monitors, filtering through the toxicity, the arguments, and the visual noise of millions of strangers. His mind felt like a hard drive that was fragmented and overheating. He saw the world in pixels. He heard the world in notification pings. Leo walked on to the wooden bridge that led to the workshop. He looked disoriented. His hand kept reaching for his pocket, checking for a phone that he had deliberately left in his car miles away. He felt naked without it, anxious and untethered. The silence of the bamboo grove was not peaceful to him. It was deafening. He was so used to the constant hum of information that the absence of it felt like a vacuum sucking the air out of his lungs. He stepped into the open-air workshop. The sound of the river flowing beneath the floorboards was a constant, rushing whisper. Kenji was standing by a large wooden vat filled with milky water, stirring it with a long bamboo pole. He did not look up immediately. He continued his rhythmic motion, swirling the water in a figure-8 pattern, creating a silent vortex. I need to reset," Leo said, his voice sounding thin and artificial in the humid air. "I feel like my brain is full of static. I can't sleep. I can't think. I just see scrolling text." Kenji stopped stirring. He rested the pole against the side of the vat. He turned to look at Leo. His eyes were dark and calm, like the deepest part of the river. He saw the tremors in Leo's hands. He saw the way Leo's eyes darted around the room, unable to focus on any single object for more than a second. "You have forgotten the texture of the world," Kenji said softly. "You have been touching glass for too long. Glass is smooth. It offers no resistance. It offers no life. To heal, you must touch something that has a grain, something that fights back a little." Kenji wiped his hands on a cloth. "Come," he said. "We do not start with the paper. We start with the tree." He led Leo to the back of the workshop, where bundles of long, slender branches were soaking in a trough of clear river water. These were branches of the kozo tree, the paper mulberry. "The paper is inside," Kenji explained, lifting a soaking branch. "But it is protected by the dark outer bark. We must strip it away. It requires force." He handed Leo a blunt iron knife. He showed him how to grip the branch. Scrape. Remove the black bark to reveal the white fiber underneath. It is tedious work. It is repetitive. It is exactly what you need. Leo took the knife. He held the wet branch. It felt slimy and cold. He began to scrape. The knife bit into the dark bark, peeling it away in long, muddy strips. Underneath, a layer of pristine, creamy white fiber was revealed. At first, Leo's mind raced. He thought about the emails he was missing. He thought about the news cycle. He wondered how long this would take. But the physical sensation of the work began to intrude on his thoughts. The smell of the wet wood was sharp and green. The sound of the knife scraping against the branch was gritty and real. Scrape, peel, scrape. He worked for an hour. His hands began to ache, but it was a good ache. It was a specific, localized sensation that grounded him in his body. The pile of black bark grew on the floor. The pile of white, clean sticks grew on the table. He was separating the darkness from the light, physically removing the outer shell to find the pure core. The outer bark is the noise, Kenji murmured, working beside him. The news, the opinions, the likes, the shares. It is just the skin. It protects, yes, but it is not the substance. The fiber, the white part, that is your mind. It has been there all along, buried under the bark. Once the white fibers were stripped, they had to be softened. Kenji took the clean inner bark and placed it on a heavy stone block. He handed Leo a large wooden mallet made of oak. "Now," Kenji said, "we beat it. We do not destroy it. We separate the fibers. We want them to loosen their grip on each other so they can be rearranged." Leo lifted the mallet. It was heavy. He let it fall onto the wet bark. The sound was a dull, wet thud that echoed through the bamboo grove. He struck again and again. With every blow, Leo felt a release of frustration. He channeled his anger at the algorithms, his exhaustion from the screens, his fear of missing out. He poured it all into the mallet. He smashed the fibers. He pounded the wet mass until it began to break down, turning from strips of wood into a soft, cotton-like pulp. The rhythm took over. Lift, strike, lift, strike. Kenji watched him. He knew that this physical exertion was purging the adrenaline from Leo's system. The young man was sweating now. His breath was coming in deep gasps. But his eyes were no longer darting around. They were fixed on the stone. He was present. The pulp became smooth and uniform. It looked like wet wool. "Enough," Kenji said gently, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder to stop the mallet. "You have broken it down. The structure is gone. Now it is chaos. But it is a soft chaos. It is ready to be born again." Leo dropped the mallet. His arms felt heavy and loose. He looked at the mass of white pulp on the stone. It looked nothing like the tree it had come from. It was a blank slate, just like his mind was beginning to feel. The static was gone, replaced by the ringing silence of the forest and the sound of his own breathing. "Keep the beaten white pulp, which looked like a ball of wet cotton, and carried it to the large wooden vat called the tsukibune. The vat was filled with cold, clear river water that was constantly circulating. He dropped the pulp into the water. It didn't sink like a stone. It dispersed. It spread out like a drop of white ink falling into a clear pool, expanding into a milky, fibrous cloud that suspended itself in the liquid. "This is the suspension," Kenji explained, his voice blending with the gentle rushing sound of the river below. "But the fibers are wild. They want to clump together. To make them float evenly, we need magic. We need neri." He picked up a bamboo ladle and dipped it into a separate jar filled with a thick, clear, viscous goo. This was neri, a mucilage extracted from the roots of the sunset hibiscus plant. It was slimy and stringy, dripping from the ladle in a long, slow strand that caught the light like liquid glass. Kenji poured the neri into the vat. As he stirred the water with a bamboo pole, a transformation occurred. The water changed its texture. It became thicker, heavier, and more viscous. It didn't splash anymore. It rolled. The white fibers, which had been floating aimlessly, suddenly separated from one another. They were suspended perfectly in the thick liquid, floating freely, equidistant from their neighbors, like stars in a white galaxy. "The neri prevents them from tangling too soon," Kenji murmured, watching the swirling water. "It creates space. It slows down the water. It gives us time to shape the sheet. Your mind needs neri, Leo. You need a viscous medium to slow down your thoughts, to keep them from clumping into anxiety. You need to create suspension before you can create structure." Leo watched the vat. The liquid looked inviting. It moved with a slow, languid grace that was completely opposite to the frantic speed of his digital life. It was a pool of potential, waiting to be organized. Kenji picked up the 𝐓𝐡𝐞, a rectangular wooden frame holding a fine, flexible screen made of split bamboo splinters held together with silk thread. It was a tool of incredible craftsmanship, lightweight yet strong. "Watch the wave," Kenji said. "I do not scoop the water. I invite it." He held the frame with both hands. He leaned over the vat. With a fluid motion that involved his entire body from his knees to his shoulders, he dipped the far edge of the frame into the milky water. He pulled it towards him, scooping up a shallow layer of the liquid. The water rushed over the bamboo screen. It flowed like a miniature tide. Kenji rocked the frame gently back and forth, side to side.
The water sloshed rhythmically, washing the white fibers across the screen. Dip, rock, flow, drain. The sound was hypnotic. It was the sound of water moving against wood, a soft, sloshing lullaby. As the water drained through the fine mesh of the screen, it left the white fibers behind. But Kenji didn't stop with one dip. He dipped again and again. Layer upon layer of microscopic fibers were being laid down, interlocking with each other in a random, chaotic, yet perfect dance. "If I stop moving," Kenji explained, not breaking his rhythm, "the paper will be uneven. I must keep the water dancing until it drains away. It is a relationship with gravity. I am negotiating with the water to leave its treasure behind." Leo watched mesmerized. It wasn't just manual labor. It was a dance. It was a repetitive, meditative motion that required absolute focus. There was no room for multitasking here. If Kenji checked a phone, the sheet would be ruined. The water demanded presence.
"Now you," Kenji said, handing the frame to Leo. "Do not grip it tight. Hold it like you would hold a sleeping bird." Leo took the frame. It was heavier than it looked, especially when laden with water. He stood before the vat. The milky white universe swirled below him. He dipped the frame. At first, he was too jerky. The water splashed over the sides, and the fibers clumped in the middle. "Gently," Kenji corrected. "Use your knees. Rock with the water." Leo tried again. He dipped the edge. He felt the cold, viscous water rush onto the screen. He rocked the frame. He watched the liquid wave travel across the bamboo mesh. It was fascinating. As the water fell through the screen back into the vat, a thin, glistening layer of white matter remained. It looked like slush or wet snow. He dipped again. The layer grew thicker. He could see the fibers weaving themselves together. They were locking arms, holding on to each other to create a solid surface. "That's it," Kenji whispered. "You are weaving water. You are creating a surface where there was none." Think about your thoughts, Leo. Instead of letting them drown you, catch them. Let the noise drain away and keep only the substance. The repetitive motion, dip, rock, drain, began to lull Leo into a trance state. The sound of the water was a white noise that washed away the static in his head. He wasn't thinking about moderation cues or angry comments. He was thinking about the flow. He was thinking about the evenness of the sheet. He was creating a blank page, a tabula rasa, and the act of creating it was cleaning his own slate. Once the sheet was formed, it was time to transfer it. This was the most delicate part. The paper was wet and fragile, no stronger than a wet tissue. Kenji showed Leo how to turn the frame over and press the wet sheet onto a pile of previously made sheets. This pile was called the 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Leo held his breath. He lowered the frame. He pressed the wet paper against the stack. He rolled the frame up gently. With a soft sucking sound, the wet sheet peeled away from the bamboo screen and adhered to the stack. It lay there perfectly flat, glistening with moisture. It didn't look like paper yet. It looked like a slab of wet tofu or a layer of white silk. Good, Kenji nodded. It is a good sheet. It has no holes. It has integrity. Leo looked at the single sheet he had made. It was just a piece of wet fiber, but to him, it felt like a masterpiece. He had made it from a branch. He had stripped it, beaten it, suspended it, and caught it. It was a tangible proof of his existence, unlike the digital ghosts he chased all day. He dipped the frame again. He wanted to make another, and another. The stack grew higher, a tower of potential. The smell of the wet paper was clean and neutral. It smelled of nothingness, which was exactly what Leo needed. He needed the scent of nothingness to clear his senses. The afternoon wore on. The light in the bamboo grove shifted from dappled gold to a cool twilight blue. The only sounds were the rushing river, the knocking of the bamboo stalks in the wind, and the rhythmic splashing of the vat. Leo worked in silence, his body tired, his hands cold and wet, but his mind clearer than it had been in years. He was no longer a filter for the world's noise. He was a maker of quiet surfaces.
The stack of wet paper, the 𝐓𝐡𝐞, sat on the wooden stand like a block of heavy, white clay. It held hundreds of sheets, but they were saturated with water, indistinguishable from one another. To become paper, they had to undergo the trial of pressure. Master Kenji led Leo to the press, a massive, ancient device made of iron and timber. It operated on a simple lever system designed to exert immense, slow force. Kenji placed the wet stack beneath the heavy wooden platen. He began to turn the screw. It moved with a low, rumbling groan that vibrated through the floorboards. As the wood pressed down on the paper, water began to weep from the sides of the stack. It didn't gush, it trickled. Clear, clean droplets fell into the catch basin below, creating a rhythmic, dripping melody that sounded like the aftermath of a rainstorm. "We are squeezing out the excess," Kenji whispered, watching the water flow. "The fibers have drunk their fill. Now they must let go of what they do not need to become strong. It is the same with you, Leo. You have absorbed so much information, so much noise. Now, under the pressure of silence, you are letting it drain away." Leo watched the water leave the paper. It was a visual purging. He felt a sympathetic release in his own body. The tension that had been hydraulic in his veins was lowering. After the pressing was done, Kenji lifted the block. It was now much thinner, dense, and firm. He peeled off a single damp sheet. It held together. It was no longer slush. It was a fragile, damp fabric. He carried it to a series of tall, smooth wooden boards made of ginkgo wood, standing in the drying area. He handed Leo a wide, flat brush made of soft deer hair. "Brush it onto the wood," Kenji instructed. "Start from the center and sweep outward. You must smooth out the air bubbles. You must make it one with the wood." Leo applied the damp sheet to the vertical board. He took the brush. He swept it across the paper. The bristles were incredibly soft, moving over the damp fibers with a hushed, sweeping sound. It felt like calming a frightened animal. With every stroke, the paper flattened, adhering perfectly to the wood, becoming a smooth, white skin, stretched tight. The drying boards were lined up in the open air of the workshop, catching the last warmth of the fading day and the gentle breeze drifting through the bamboo. Dozens of sheets were plastered there, looking like white flags of surrender. Surrender to peace, surrender to the process. As the moisture evaporated, a subtle transformation began to take place. Leo sat on the floorboards, his back against a cedar pillar, watching the paper dry. It was a process so slow, it was almost imperceptible. Yet, if he looked away for a moment, he missed it. The damp, gray translucency of the wet fiber was slowly fading. It was being replaced by a brilliant, opaque whiteness. It was the color of snow, the color of clouds, the color of a fresh start. The air in the drying yard smelled of sun-warmed wood and clean laundry. It was a scent of purity. Leo felt his eyes tracing the edges of the sheets. There were no pixels here. There were no notifications popping up on the surface. There was just the grain of the paper and the grain of the wood. The simplicity of it was overwhelming. After years of looking at screens that demanded his attention, looking at something that demanded nothing was the ultimate relief. "It is tightening," Kenji observed, sitting beside him with a cup of tea. As the water leaves, the fibers pull together. They bond. They become a shield. Leo nodded, too relaxed to speak. He realized that his mind had finally stopped scrolling. He wasn't thinking about the next post or the next crisis. He was thinking about the color white. He was visualizing his own brain as one of those drying sheets, blank, clean, and waiting. The static noise that had plagued him for years had been replaced by the rustling of the bamboo leaves and the slow, silent work of evaporation. When the sun dipped below the jade mountains, casting long blue shadows across the valley, the paper was ready. It was bone dry. It looked taut against the wood, almost vibrating with tension. "Now," Kenji said, standing up, "the harvest." He showed Leo how to peel the paper from the board. He used a small bamboo spatula to lift one corner. Then he gripped the edge of the sheet. "Pull," Kenji said. "Listen to the voice of the paper." Leo pulled. The paper detached from the wood with a sound that sent shivers of pleasure down his spine. It was a crisp, dry, crackling sound, a sound like walking on fresh snow, or the rustle of dry autumn leaves. Crinkle, snap, swish. It was the sound of something finished. Leo held the sheet in his hands. It was light as air, yet strong. He ran his thumb over the surface. It wasn't smooth and soulless like printer paper. It had texture. It had bumps and ridges where the fibers had interlocked. It felt warm and alive. He held it up to the twilight sky. The paper glowed. He could see the chaotic, beautiful pattern of the fibers, the cloud he had made in the vat. "This is Washi," Kenji said softly. "It is not just paper. It is a home for thoughts. But look at it, Leo. It is empty. It is a tabula rasa, a clean slate. You have spent your life reacting to other people's words. Now you hold a space where you can choose your own." Leo looked at the blank white rectangle. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. It represented possibility. It represented a restart. He realized he didn't have to carry the digital noise with him. He could put it down. He could be as blank and open as this sheet. Leo left the bamboo grove as the stars began to pierce the canopy. He carried a roll of the paper he had made, wrapped carefully in brown cloth. He walked back to his car, but he didn't turn on the radio. He drove in silence, preserving the quiet he had gathered. He arrived at his apartment in the city. The Wi-Fi router blinked in the corner, a blue eye watching him. Leo walked over and unplugged it. The lights on the device died. The hum stopped. He went to his bedroom. He unrolled the sheet of washi paper and placed it on his desk. He didn't write on it. He didn't mar the surface. He just wanted to look at it. Under the soft lamplight, the texture of the paper cast tiny shadows looking like a landscape of snow. He changed into his nightclothes and climbed into bed. The physical exhaustion of the day, the scraping of the bark, the pounding of the mallet, the rocking of the vat, settled into his muscles as a heavy, sweet comfort. He closed his eyes. Usually, his eyelids would be screens playing back the day's stress. But tonight, when he closed his eyes, all he saw was white. He saw the milky cloud in the vat. He saw the brilliant white sheet drying in the sun. His breathing slowed, mimicking the rhythm of the river. Inhale, suspension. Exhale, release. The concept of the clean slate washed over him. Tomorrow was a blank page. He didn't have to clutter it. He could keep it simple. He could keep it clean. Leo's mind drifted away from the city, floating back to the bamboo grove, settling like a fiber on the screen. And there, in the quiet, unwritten space of the night, the paper maker fell into a deep, textured, and spotless sleep.
And so, our story comes to a gentle close. May your mind be calm, and your dreams be kind. If you're still listening, we'll be waiting for you here again with another story from Midnight Murmurs Studio. Until then, sleep well.